They say the wind in the Midwest carries the scent of soil, of harvest, and, sometimes, of something that was never meant to be named. When the Miller family first arrived in the quiet farming town of Prosper, the wind swept across the endless cornfields like a warm welcome, or perhaps a warning in disguise. They stood by the side of the dusty gravel road, staring at the old wooden house they'd bought for a price too good to be true. In the distance, corn stretched to the horizon, golden beneath the afternoon sun, swaying unnaturally, as if not just the breeze moved it, but something hidden within. "Are we really going to live here?" Emily, their teenage daughter, asked, suspicion edging her voice. "A fresh start," Mr. Miller replied, forcing a smile, but his gaze lingered on the Scarecrow in the center of the field. A limp figure of straw, slumped, weather-worn, with a crooked hat, and a face turned unmistakably in their direction. That night, just past midnight, young Noah sat up in bed, eyes wide, skin clammy, and whispered into the dark. "The corn mother says we mustn't walk the fields on solstice night." No one understood what he meant. By morning, Noah remembered nothing, but something had awakened. Each dawn after, they found footprints in the dirt, too large to be Noah's, too deep to be from someone just passing through. The Scarecrow seemed closer, angled differently, watching, and the wind, it no longer smelled of soil. It carried the cold, metallic tang of rusted iron, of dried blood. The Miller family didn't come to Prosper for fortune. They came for silence, for open skies and the kind of life that felt slow, steady, safe. The city had taken its toll on them. The layoffs, the car alarms, the gray buildings that always felt too close. So when they found the listing for a 2-story farmhouse in a town no one seemed to have heard of, they took it as a sign. Prosper. Even the name sounded like hope. The drive-in was something out of a postcard. Rolling hills, weathered barns, and miles upon miles of golden corn swaying in the summer wind. But as they crossed the narrow bridge into town, something subtle shifted. The sunlight didn't feel as warm. The corn seemed too tall, and the air, though clean, carried an edge of something musty and old, like time forgotten. The townsfolk welcomed them with wide smiles and warm handshakes. Elderly women brought pies. Children waved from rusted bikes. Even the sheriff, a quiet man with heavy eyes, tipped his hat and offered, "Let us know if you need anything." Still, beneath all that charm, there was a stillness. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels like the world is holding its breath. In the backyard of the Miller home stood the edge of the cornfield. It pressed against their fence like a living wall, tall, dense, and almost unnaturally symmetrical. And in the middle of it, half hidden by the stalks, stood a scarecrow. Not just any scarecrow. It was slouched, arms spread, wearing a faded plaid shirt and a rotted burlap sack for a head. His mouth was sewn shut with twine, but the eyes, 2 sunken pits filled with dark, moldy cotton, seemed aware. No matter where you stood in the yard, it looked like it was facing you. Mrs. Miller laughed it off. Mr. Miller said it was just tradition. But Emily, the teenage daughter, refused to step near the fence after sundown. And Noah, the youngest, whispered at dinner, "I think it moves when we're not looking." The town was preparing for their annual harvest festival. Posters were pinned to the grocery store windows, hand-drawn art of wheat bundles, bonfires, fiddles, and hayrides. Everyone spoke of it with reverence, calling it the most sacred night of the year. Sacred, not fun, not festive, sacred. "We honor the land," said Mrs. Holloway, the elderly neighbor. "Prosper owes its bounty to tradition, and tradition is binding." There was something unnerving about the way she said it, as if it wasn't just about corn and celebrations, as if the land required more than water and sun, something older. Each night, the wind blew harder through the stalks. Whispers rustled through the corn, though no one was there. And every morning, when the sun rose behind their house, the Scarecrow looked just a little closer, like it was listening, waiting. It started with whispers, not from the townsfolk but from Noah. He would sit by the window after dinner, his small fingers tracing invisible shapes in the fogged glass. murmuring softly. At first, his parents assumed it was just imaginary play. Moving to a strange town had been hard on him. No friends, no familiar places. A 6-year-old's mind was bound to invent things to fill the silence. But what chilled Emily, what made her pause one evening as she passed behind him, was the way Noah wasn't murmuring nonsense. He was listening, nodding, pausing, responding. "Yes, I know where the sharp rock is. I can show you tomorrow, Mino." Emily froze.
Mẹ ngô.
The next night, he said a different name, Nai Bap. When Mrs. Miller gently asked who that was, Noah smiled as if it were obvious. "She lives in the corn. She watches everything. She says the land is hungry again." Something shifted in the house after that. It wasn't sudden, but like a slow leak in a foundation you didn't know was there until the floors start warping. The air felt heavier. Mr. Miller's old dog, Samson, refused to go near the back door. The cornfield, once golden and swaying, seemed darker now, almost wilted, though nothing had changed. Or so it appeared. Noah grew stranger. He began waking up with dirt under his fingernails and straw tangled in his pajamas. He said he had dreams of walking through the corn, but when asked how he got outside, he'd shrug. His window was always locked, the door always shut. One morning, Emily found dozens of tiny handprints pressed into the condensation on her bedroom mirror, smaller than Noah's, and none of the windows had been opened. Prosper began to feel less like a town and more like a stage, where every player knew their role and watched you when they thought you weren't looking. When Mr. Miller mentioned in passing that Noah had been having nightmares, the sheriff only nodded solemnly. "This land's old," he said, as if that were an explanation. At the general store, when Mrs. Miller told the cashier her Scarecrow kept shifting positions, the old man didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He leaned closer. "The field protects what feeds it," he whispered, like a warning carved into fog. Later that week, the town held a potluck by the church. Children ran under lanterns strung between trees. Music played from a portable speaker. It was idyllic until Mr. Miller noticed that, during prayer, the townsfolk turned toward the field. Not the church, the field. That's when Noah began bringing things in from outside. First, it was feathers, black ones broken and twisted. Then bones. Small, dry, brittle bones that looked like they belonged to birds or squirrels. When asked where he got them, he said the corn gave them to him. "It's for the offering," he said with a soft, eerie calm. "The soil needs more this year." Then came the smell. Not all at once. It crept in gradually. First in the mornings, a faint rotting scent drifting through the open windows. Then stronger, sharper, until it clung to the curtains and soaked into the floorboards. Mr. Miller checked the crawl space. Nothing. He searched the drains. Nothing. Emily, too afraid to sleep, wandered into the kitchen one night to get water and saw muddy footprints leading in from the back door. They didn't belong to anyone in the family, and they never stopped at the door. They went all the way to Noah's room. By now, things were no longer just strange. They were wrong. The family began hearing stories in hushed tones. Names never spoken above a whisper. A teenage boy who had vanished the previous year. A young couple whose car was found at the edge of the corn but were never seen again. A farmhand who walked into the field and never came out. "Sometimes the land takes what it's owed," the sheriff said, staring past Mr. Miller like he wasn't really there. "But why?" Mr. Miller pressed, his voice brittle with rising anger. "Why would anyone believe that? Why would you let it happen?" The sheriff's eyes shifted, dark and ancient in their stillness. "Because the corn grows," he replied. "And in this town, we keep our promises." One night, as the wind howled through the fields, Emily awoke to a sound she couldn't place. Not footsteps, not voices, rustling, heavy, rhythmic. She crept to her window and peeled back the curtain. In the moonlight, the Scarecrow was gone. She turned, panicked, chest pounding, and saw something standing at the edge of the hallway, tall, lean, a figure wrapped in dark fabric, its hands dripping dirt, its face shrouded in a sack. In one hand, it held a rusted sickle. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't speak, and then it was gone. The next morning, the Scarecrow was back, but its shirt was torn, and one arm was missing. That same day, the neighbor's dog vanished. Only a trail of blood remained, leading to the fence line. Mrs. Miller finally confronted the old woman next door, Mrs. Holloway, demanding answers. The woman stared at her long and hard, then sighed. "Your son has been chosen," she said simply. "You should be honored. The Reaper doesn't pick just anyone. Only the innocent. Only the pure." Mrs. Miller screamed at her, demanded to know what they had done, what they had promised. Mrs. Holloway's face went still. Her eyes glazed, as if remembering something distant and painful. "When we stopped offering, the land turned on us. Crops died. Livestock bled out. Children fell ill. That's when he came, Nibap, the one who walks at dusk, the one who harvests more than grain. We made a pact. One life for 1 year of bounty." "And what happens if you refuse?" Emily asked, her voice cracking. Mrs. Holloway only whispered, "Then the field takes all." That night, the house groaned, not from wind, not from settling wood, from something moving beneath it. The Miller family huddled in the living room, too afraid to sleep, each of them facing a different corner of the house. As the clock struck 3 a.m., Noah sat up, eyes blank, voice distant. "He's coming to till the soil. We have to be still. If we move, he knows we're not ready." The lights flickered, the wind howled, and then all at once silence. Not a peaceful silence, a hollow one, as if the world outside the house had stopped breathing. The next morning, the Miller family found something nailed to their front door. A bundle of dried corn husks, tied in twine. Inside, a tooth, small, human. Noah didn't eat that day. He sat staring at the window, unmoving, lips silently repeating something over and over. Emily pressed her ear to the glass. The corn was whispering, not with wind, with words. And from deep within the field, she could swear she saw the Scarecrow, no longer bound to the stake, no longer made of straw, but watching and waiting. The truth wasn't buried deep. It was waiting just beneath the skin of things. They found it in the attic. Emily was the one who discovered the box. She had gone searching for a storm lantern during a thunderclap that knocked the power out again. And when she moved aside an old trunk covered in a rotting quilt, the floor creaked with a hollowness that sounded different. Curious, she pried up a floorboard and found a wooden box, weathered, bound in blackened iron hinges. Inside were old papers wrapped in oilcloth, yellowed and brittle, and beneath them, something far older, a carved corn husk doll charred at the feet, and a ledger, not a normal one. This was no journal, no diary. This was a harvest book, and it kept a record, each page with a name, a year, and a note, accepted or refused. The ledger dated back to 1874, the founding year of Prosper. Each entry was meticulous. The handwriting shifted over decades, but the message never changed. Every year, one name, one person, one sacrifice. The ink was thick and faded in places, but there was no mistaking the pattern. Every 12th full moon after the solstice. One taken, one given. In years where accepted was written, the crops flourished. In years marked refused, entire fields failed. One entry in 1922 simply read, "All 3 children, crops burned anyway." Mrs. Miller stared at the book for a long time. Her lips trembled. Her voice broke. "It's real. All of it. The stories, the whispers. They weren't just old superstition. They've been doing this for over a century." Emily ran her fingers across a page from just 2 years ago. It read, "Anna Cooper, age 9, accepted." There was no sadness in the ink, just cold, permanent record-keeping. They had sacrificed a child. That same night, thunder cracked the sky, and with it came another sound, low and scraping, like something dragged across stone. Mr. Miller took the old ledger to the sheriff's office the next morning. His hands shook as he slammed it down on the desk. "You knew," he said, voice trembling with a fury held barely at bay. "You knew what this town does. What they did to that little girl. What they might do to my son. Sheriff Alden didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. He simply sighed. None of us like it, he said softly. But it's the way of the land. The way of the land? You offer children to what? A monster? A myth? The sheriff turned the book around to a page from 1937. At the top was a crude drawing, a sickle in one hand, a corn mask in the other. Below it, the reaper, the one who tills the blood. He's not a myth, the sheriff said. He's a promise. Back at the house, Noah had gone silent again. Not in the way of a child sulking, but in a deeper, eerie way, as if someone had turned off a switch inside him. He sat on the living room floor, staring at the front door. He's coming, he whispered. That night, the power cut out again. Mr. Miller stepped outside to start the backup generator. But halfway down the porch steps, he froze. The Scarecrow was gone. Not just from their field, but from every field. And in its place, at the far end of the corn maze lit faintly by the moon, stood a figure. Not made of straw, but real, and moving. It was tall, cloaked in tattered robes made of stitched corn husks. A long, curved blade hung from its hand, rusted, serrated. Its face was a mask of bone and husk. One eye hollow, the other glowing faintly with an ember buried inside. It didn't move toward him. It didn't need to. The air itself recoiled around it. The corn bent backwards, parting as it walked. Mr. Miller stumbled back inside and locked every door. Noah smiled. He's early this year, he said almost cheerfully. Because we're new. The next day, the town sent an envelope. No postage, no return address. Just slipped through the door with a wax seal of a sickle embedded in corn. Inside, a letter written in red ink. The harvest festival begins at sundown. You and your family are our honored guests. Bring your son. The soil remembers. There was no signature. Noah didn't seem surprised. They picked me, he said softly, like it was a school assignment. It's okay. That's how things grow. Mrs. Miller collapsed into tears, begging, pleading. She held him so tightly it hurt. But he didn't cry. He just stared out the window again. Emily couldn't take it. We have to run, she hissed to her father. We pack up. Tonight, while they're distracted. But Mr. Miller stared at the sickle mark on the envelope and said nothing. Emily, unwilling to wait, dug deeper into the old house's history. Beneath the barn, she found a cellar door hidden under hay bales. It wasn't just storage. It was a shrine. Corn dolls hung from the beams, some nailed upside down, some with their faces burned. Symbols were carved into the dirt floor, circles with eyes, spirals ending in blades, and bones. So many bones, arranged in perfect spirals, some still with bits of children's shoes. A single teddy bear, molded with rot. This house wasn't a home. It was a harvest house, a place the town had used before, a place built on rituals. And they had brought her family here, not by accident, by design. That evening, the Miller family sat in silence. The house was quiet. The wind had stopped. Noah sat at the table, eyes distant, voice flat. They said, I have to walk into the field before the fire reaches the sky. Emily looked to her parents, eyes wild with fear. We're not going to let this happen, she snapped. We are not letting them take him. But then Mr. Miller spoke, soft, broken. If we run, what if the land turns on them? On all of us? What if more die? Mrs. Miller screamed, her voice cracking. So you're going to sacrifice your son to save their goddamn corn? Silence. That night, they heard the drums. The harvest festival had begun. The town lit fires in the fields, dressed in straw robes, painted their faces with ash and husk. They danced in circles around a burning pyre, and in the center of it stood him, the reaper. He said nothing, but his sickle gleamed in the firelight, as if it were licking the flames. Path was cleared through the corn, a narrow trail freshly cut, and at the end of it a wooden table stood, stained, ancient, waiting. The Miller family stood at the edge of the yard, holding Noah's hands, and they had to choose. Would they walk him into the field? Or would they fight, knowing what might follow? The air buzzed with chanting. The town moved like a single creature, united in faith or fear, and somewhere in the distance, the corn shivered. Not from wind, but from something waking up beneath it, waiting to see what they would do. The drums began at dusk, low, methodical, like the heartbeat of something that had been sleeping for too long. The Millers watched from the upstairs window as the town came alive, or rather, became something else entirely. Lanterns swayed on shepherds' hooks lining the dirt path that led to the corn maze. Children wore crowns of dried husks. Adults painted their faces with ash and rust-colored dye, their movements slow and ritualistic. Some carried torches, others, bundles wrapped in cloth, dripping dark red. From the distance, it looked like celebration. But up close, it was something else. Something older. Something that remembered blood. Emily whispered, "They're not people anymore." And her father, pale, trembling, whispered back, "Maybe they never were." The knock came just after nightfall. Slow. 3 times. No one stood at the door. Only a figure carved from bundled straw, left on the welcome mat. His head was a cracked gourd. A note pinned to its chest. "The harvest cannot be delayed. Bring the boy." Mr. Miller grabbed a hammer. Mrs. Miller broke down. Emily packed a bag. And Noah? Noah stood calmly by the door, as if waiting to be picked up for school. "Can't fight the Reaper," he said, staring into the dark yard. "He's already here." Then the power died. Again. But this time, it didn't come back. They ran. Through the back door, through the yard, into the cornfield. The lights of the harvest festival glowed behind them, orange and flickering like distant fires on the horizon. But ahead, only darkness. The corn was suffocating. The path twisted in unnatural ways, always seeming to loop back, close in, fold over itself. Behind them, voices, laughter, but not joyful, high-pitched, strained, full of menace. Emily screamed as something darted across the path. Too tall to be human, too fast to be real. Stalks cracked under heavy footsteps. They were being herded. "This isn't a maze," Mr. Miller panted. "It's a trap." Then they saw it, the altar, built from rotted wood and bound with twine, surrounded by straw dolls nailed to pikes. Beneath it, the earth was black with soaked blood, fresh. A mound of children's shoes half buried in the dirt. The drums were louder now, thudding in their bones. And then the Reaper stepped from the shadows. He wasn't a man. He never had been. The figure stood at least 7 feet tall, draped in layers of cornstalk robes. A sickle in one hand, curved and jagged like a serpent's fang. His mask, if it was a mask, was carved from a skull, fused with husk and vine, glowing faintly from within. Noah stepped forward. Mrs. Miller screamed and pulled him back. Emily threw a rock at the Reaper's feet. It didn't flinch. Then it moved, not walking but gliding, closing the distance with unnatural speed. Mr. Miller swung his hammer, but it was knocked aside like a twig. The Reaper raised its sickle and paused. Noah spoke. "I'll go," he said, quiet, calm. Tears streamed down his face. "But only if they leave." The Reaper tilted its head, and then nodded. The Millers had seconds to decide. They could take him and run, but something in their bones told them the Reaper would take more if denied. Emily looked at her brother, at his trembling lips, his tiny fists clenched. "I'm not afraid," he whispered, and then he smiled. "She's with me, the Corn Mother." Mrs. Miller collapsed. Mr. Miller turned away. Emily couldn't move, and so he walked, alone, onto the altar. The flames roared behind them. The town chanted, low and guttural, a language lost to time. And then came the sound. SHRRRK. One clean slice. The fire turned green. The sky shook, and all the lights went out. Morning came, gray and silent. The Millers awoke in their home. No blood, no torches, no scorch marks. The field behind their house looked untouched. But Noah was gone. His room was cold, his bed perfectly made. A single corn husk doll lay on the pillow, its face blank, its arms stretched wide. They ran to the sheriff's office. There was no sheriff. The building was empty, dusty, as if no one had been there in years. The town was silent. Stores closed. Windows boarded. No voices. No music. No festival remnants. Prosper had vanished. They tried to leave. The car started. They drove for miles. But the road looped. Every turn brought them back to the same rusted sign. Welcome to Prosper. EST 1874. Emily tried burning the field. The fire burned for hours, then disappeared. And the corn was untouched. At night, they hear his voice. From the attic. From the vents. From the soil. I'm still here. She let me stay. You owe the land now. And every morning, the Scarecrow is a little closer. One day, it will be standing in the doorway. They thought it was just an old farming town with smiling neighbors and golden fields. They thought they had escaped the chaos of the city for peace. But in Prosper, the land never forgets, and it always takes what it's owed. So ask yourself, if your child was chosen, would you run? Would you fight? Or would you sacrifice to save the rest? Because in Prosper, the harvest never ends. Sheaf of rice. If you felt that chill down your spine, don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. Hit the like button if you're still watching from behind your hands. And tell us in the comments, would you survive the cornfield? Or would you be the next offering? Until next time, stay out of the fields.